Welcome back. If you've been feeling hotter recently, it's not your imagination here. According to recent reports, global warming accelerating and humans, as we said, to blame. Hundreds of scientists from around the globe released their annual State of the Climate report last month, a report that for the first time linked recent weather extremes, to man. The extreme weather of 2011.
Oh gosh, that is a monster tornado.
The worst drought in a decade, even the recent headlines about the hottest 12 months on record, all are a global concern. Areas of the world are getting hotter and drier. Flood zones getting pummeled. Extreme weather becoming the rule, not the exception. And according to many scientists, global warming is a cause.
What we know really well about global warming is that it increases the likelihood of more extreme events.
Last month, hundreds of scientists from 48 nations released their annual State of the Climate report, which shows the trend towards a rapidly warming planet. It has only been accelerating. The study examined headlines like rising temperatures, both on land and at sea, and they also examined disappearing sea ice. 2011 showed the second smallest sea area of ice on record. They also noted the glaciers around the world continue to shrink. Greenland has one of the largest ice bodies in the world, and pictures now show Greenland's glaciers are melting 30 times faster than they were just a decade ago. Over the last century, sea levels have risen about 10 inches, but by 2050, scientists predict the levels will increase another foot. If that holds true, parts of cities like Miami and New Orleans will be underwater. For the first time in its history, this study says 2011 weather extremes are connected to man-made global warming.
There may not be a tipping point this year or next year, but the odds just keep growing. And it's one of these problems where the sooner you deal with it, the easier it is.
Now, the report didn't make any direct connections between a particular weather event and global warming, but it did say that the greenhouse gas level on Earth higher than at any time ever on record, and they find no reason to believe that that was caused naturally. Well, joining us now to explain and why you ought to care here is Eric Whelan of Environment New York. Environment New York recently released their own report called When It Rains, It Pours, Global Warming and the Increase in Extreme Precipitation Between 1948 and 2011. Now, the recent report explains that the more intense and frequent precipitation means more property damage and increased threat to human life. Eric, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
You've had this for a while here. It seems to the outside person here that there seems to be more and more unanimity, seemingly by the year, that the problem's real, the problem's man-made here, it's not going away, and if anything, it's accelerating decade by decade. Has there almost been a little bit of a come-to-Jesus moment where people are saying, geez, we really can't wait for this here. We got to do something.
Yeah, I think that's really true for people. I mean, the debate in the scientific community has been over for probably a decade now. But unfortunately, the debate in political realms or in the newspapers is not quite solved yet. But as more extreme weather events occur, as we see intense flooding like Hurricane Irene and Storm Lee, as we're seeing droughts across the Midwest and intense wildfires, people are starting to realize these scientists knew what they were talking about. And in fact, if they were wrong about anything, they were only wrong about the severity of the problem. Global warming is intensifying. It's getting worse every year. It's something that is tracking along the worst case scenarios.
Now, let's go through some of the consequences, and you can use New York as an example for what you follow. The extreme precipitation here, the rising water levels that we're having a problem, and the extreme temps. It just seems that each year it's getting more progressively extreme. That's not our imagination, is it?
Not whatsoever, unfortunately. The science shows that 9 of the 10 hottest years in history are since 2000. And in fact, the hottest year on record is 2010. And 2012 had the hottest first 6 months of any year on record as well. Now, of course, this creates a warmer atmosphere with more moisture. While some parts of the country are getting hit with droughts, we're getting hit with extreme downpours. So unfortunately, our short end of the stick here in New York is a dramatic increase in the amount of extreme precipitation events. So our study that we released last week actually showed that the storm of the year in 1948 is now not happening every year, but it's actually happening every 7.5 months.
Wow.
So these weather events are becoming much more rapid. And then when they do occur, they're dropping a lot more rain. In fact, on average, New York is getting hit with 25% more rain in each of these storms than we were in 1948.
Let's tell everybody why that matters, because we already said if you're in Miami or New Orleans, if the trending is right, by 2050, if they're not going to be building levees or seawalls here, they could have 2 major American cities underwater. But talk about, in our region here, what does this extreme precipitation here and the melting ice caps, how does that impact people in our neck of the woods?
Well, I don't think folks have to look too far back to know how this is impacting them here at home. In fact, with Tropical Storm Lee and Hurricane Irene, we saw massive impacts throughout the Northeast. So in 2011 alone, the United States had over 100 people die in flooding from extreme weather events. We actually lost $8 billion as a nation to flooding and crop damage from extreme weather events. And New York alone was particularly hard hit, I'm sure folks can remember.
And there's no reason that any of the modeling or the data suggests that the trending that was some anomaly. If anything, we should expect here in the years and decades to come, it's going to be becoming more and more frequent, right?
Absolutely. And in fact, the statistical analysis that we've done shows that there's almost no explanation for these weather events except for global warming. And as we know now, global warming will continue to increase and become more severe.
You know, you look around and you see some of the droughts, and you see cities like Milwaukee and St. Paul, Minnesota, 112, 114 degrees, and you chalk it up to a bad week, but then it continues, and you hate to build it off a small sample here. But what do we do about it? Because, as we said, and I think we've hit home here, there's a cause and effect, and it's almost an accelerant. The worse it gets and the more extreme the polar ends are to these storms. What can, if anything, we actually do about this? Assuming there actually was a political will to do it, let's be positive for a minute. Assuming there was some backbone and courage in Washington, can you slow this down? You can't stop it, right? I mean, is it too far along here to really significantly reverse?
Well, I think it's an important point you make about the political will to address the problem. Certainly, we have to do everything we can right away to slow down global warming before we can really talk about reversing it. Now, I'm definitely an advocate of people riding their bicycles and turning off the lights. We should be doing as much of that as possible, but it's kind of like fending yourself off from an 800-pound gorilla with a thumbtack.
Yeah.
You know, really, we have to be pressuring our decision makers to be passing policies to address global warming.
What should we be asking them to do?
Well, there are a number of good initiatives on the table right now. For example, New York is part of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, one of the first programs in the United States to cap and control global warming pollution. But then the Obama administration through the EPA has also taken a number of initiatives that will help curb the problem of global warming pollution.
But, you know, part of the frustration for many is the whole thumbtack with it. Fine, New York does it. But if all 50 states don't do it, and if the global community doesn't get behind it, isn't it almost like tilting at windmills?
Well, the bottom line really, I mean, you're totally right. We need to do a lot more than what's even been on the table so far. However, we're behind most nations in working to address this problem. And certainly we should be working to solve global warming in our own backyard before looking to other countries for their leadership. And we are seeing the impacts here in our own backyard as well.
You're a young guy. I got a few years on you. Are you worried your kids, what kind of a U.S., let alone in New York, they're going to have in 50 years from now?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm really concerned about my kids and my grandkids, but to be honest, global warming is no longer a problem of the future. We're now seeing the impacts today. So I'm worried about my life later on as well. I'm worried about our ability to grow food in the United States, our ability to supply water, our impacts from extreme storms and extreme weather events. This is not something we can continue to push down the road. It's something that we have to address right now.
Well, I appreciate a few minutes from you. Thank you so much. At least we got the dialogue going.
Thanks for your time, Richard.
Great job. All right, we're going to take a quick break, everybody. When we come back, we switch gears again. Catholic Church, it is at a crossroads. A recent report from the Vatican condemning nuns for promoting, quote, radical feminism. We're going to begin our series tonight, culminating an hour special on Thursday, focusing on the Catholic Church. And I'll make it very clear, I am a proud practicing member here, but we take a closer look at one of the oldest institutions of the world facing some very new and acute challenges. Please stay with us, everyone. We'll be right back.